We love to talk to Sam Amick each and every Thursday at this time. He is from The Athletic. He also has the Tampering Podcast. He's everywhere. Sam, how are you?
J. Ross, doing good, brother. How are you?
Doing great. How was the All-Star break for you?
No complaints. Ended up not joining my colleague fan put, and had a good time down in San Francisco one day, did the old touristy Alcatraz thing, and got stuff done around the house, so no complaints at all.
Well, there you go. As a fan of the NBA, and I hope you can still at least, take that part in while working as well, I thoroughly enjoyed All-Star Weekend. I thought it's never always perfect, but that fourth quarter, I thought the guys played as hard as possible. I enjoyed that Buddy Hield won the three-point. I thought the dunk contest was entertaining. I thought this was a really good weekend for the NBA.
Yeah, no question. And it like you said, it was a little surreal for me to watch it from the fan seat. And this is actually now 2 All-Star weekends in a row that I haven't gone to. The Charlotte one, I can safely report, I don't think I watched 1 minute of the programming. This one, the dunk contest was incredible, and even with the controversy at the end, just no matter who won, no matter what the judges said, just incredible stuff there. The Elam ending, which if people don't know is that entire system that you saw at the end of the All-Star game, and the untimed portion, the fourth quarter, and the target score being, the leading team's cumulative score through 3 quarters plus 24 to honor Kobe Bryant. Some people thought it was going to be gimmicky, and it did, I think, run the risk of being gimmicky. And in the end, just credit to the players, because it's not as complicated. I don't think some people make it out to be. They made a choice to compete and to play on both ends of the floor, especially in the fourth quarter. And you combine that with how much talent was on that floor and how special these guys are at what they do, and it was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I thought the only thing that I could see now, trying to put a GM hat on or an owner hat on, they were playing that hard that I thought, man, I hope nobody gets hurt. Oh,
for sure. I was having the same thought. I mean, I was almost like a guilty pleasure watching, going, okay, this is fun, but you've got to be kidding me. Like, can you imagine? We could say this now. Can you imagine if, Giannis went down or any of those guys? Right. I mean, they're all so important to their teams. You don't even have to really pick one. So I felt the same way. And, one thing to that point, Jay, that made me feel a little bit better after the fact was, I think this was LeBron who made a comment when he was asked about, the level of competition, that he said that going into the All-Star game, players had conversations where they would say things like, listen, like, y'all, I've seen you play harder at a pickup game at UCLA in the summertime, than I have in these All-Star games. And that kind of reminded me that, all right, let's not pretend that these guys don't go hard in practice ever or don't, compete at a high level elsewhere. But thankfully nobody got hurt, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, one of the things Jay and I have been talking about, Sam, was last week. It was great to talk to you about the article that you were a part of from The Athletic. I know in the podcast, the Tampering Podcast, it came back up. You brought it up again about, and maybe it was, the Kings just played Dallas to close the All-Star break, that Luka and Vivek were on that tech committee. But the fact that Vivek, I think in your words, was saying that he just can't move on from this organization not taking Luka. How should we interpret that? Because that could mean a lot of different things.
I mean, I just think that, only Vivek knows exactly where his head is at right now and what plans, if any, he has had kind of crystallized in his mind in terms of what changes, if any, might happen down the road. And I've been assuming that this would potentially be off-season stuff. But, it's funny because literally as we sit here chatting on the air, I'd gotten a text with somebody indicating that, put it this way, Jay, like after we put out that story, which had plenty of interesting information in it and shed a lot more light on it than had been previously shed, it's probably, very telling that in the wake of the story, a lot of the feedback within the league in terms of people who know what's going on is that it was just kind of the tip of the iceberg, and that it's, that he's extremely frustrated. And so I don't know where it all goes. And the Luka thing, I tell you what, it's wild, and it is, I think, tough for Vlade in the front office because, the draft is obviously, it's an inexact science, and people miss all the time. Here's a quick irony for you, because I'm actually working on a non-Kings Luka story for at some point down the road where we talked to a bunch of people from Luka's past. And in the course of doing that story and dealing with the Mavericks, I was reminded that back in 2013 or whatever year Giannis came out, like the irony here is that the Mavericks missed on Giannis, and they don't have any problem admitting it. They had the 13th pick that year. They were teed up to take him. They didn't take him. And then the truth is, if you look at it now, they probably wouldn't have been in a position to take Luka if they had taken Giannis. And, so misses happen. But this particular miss with the Kings and with Luka, I think the owner has made this choice to just essentially not be able to get over it and move on. And again, it doesn't help at all. And this is tough on Marvin, but that Marvin Bagley continues. You just can't, at least the Hawks can feel good about their guy with Trae Young being an all-star. And even to a lesser degree, the Suns get to see DeAndre Ayton out there putting up big numbers and competing. That is where the Kings kind of Luka pain is pretty unique.
So I got to ask you this, Sam, because it's really interesting when you talk about the Kings and missing on draft picks. It's just kind of synonymous with one another as the organization has been in Sacramento. Missing on Dame Lillard for Thomas Robinson or drafting Jimmer over Kawhi or Clay. Why is it that this is so much more polarizing than those other big names that they've missed on in the past?
The only obvious answer there is just because Luka's out there looking like a shortlist MVP candidate, and Clay, to pick a couple of the examples that you used, Clay's, reputation, I think it, has never been higher than it is right now. But back when they missed on him, he was simply a really good two-way player who was part of a championship team. It wasn't an MVP level player like Luka. Damian Lillard is a guy who took quite a few years to become kind of a fringe MVP level player. This one is right out the gate. You're looking at Luka, if you're Vivek and if you're a Kings fan, and if you like basketball kind of masochism and torturing yourself, is like you look at it and say he would have saved everything. He would have changed everything for the better. And we don't know if that's true. Now, because I do honestly understand the basketball explanation from the Kings that drafting Luka, agree or not, like it would have taken away some of De'Aaron Fox's like superpowers. Essentially, his best qualities, I think, would have been somewhat in danger if Luka was on the team. Now, the tricky part for De'Aaron is now you have to live up to that expectation that they left the runway open for you. Now you got to be special. And obviously, from De'Aaron on down, the Kings just have not been special this year. And because of what Luka's done and the fact that, it's very possible we're going to see this guy playing into the playoffs, deep into May because the Mavs are pretty darn good, then I just think it makes the miss even worse.
Something else you brought up on that podcast too, Sam, is maybe the internal struggle of the decision makers. Let's say of the Kings that have maybe rushed on moves in the past, trying to go with stability. How do they reconcile that? Because you could argue if they were to move on from Vlade, he's had enough time, but Vlade could then turn into a new GM, which then could turn into a new head coach, which then does not really lend itself to stability. So I feel like that could be an interesting internal struggle they're going through.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I got a phone call yesterday. The process, and this is like the step before the step, the process of, other executives, they always, you've got some who would love to have Vlade's job and are ruthless about it. And they're just, and they're willing to have no decorum when it comes to the way they pursue that kind of a job. And I'm not saying that I haven't had any interactions with those types of guys at this point. What you have in between, kind of the next more acceptable phase, in my opinion, is, you do have kind of a executive community where they are monitoring the Kings situation. And there are people who would love to potentially work with Vlade, who I think are now starting to put their feelers out with the Kings to find out, what do you guys plan on doing here? And might, this person or that person be a good fit? To that end, and I can't get into it. We'll see if I end up reporting something down the line, but like one guy in particular that crossed my desk yesterday, I thought was interesting because I thought he could be a really good fit with Vlade and where it would potentially allow you to, I don't think they want to move on from Luke Walton. I think you give the guy, a long-term contract through 2023, like they did, Luke has not had very much time to show them what he can do. Vlade's a different story. So that's one possible approach where you you kind of change the roles and add another voice to the front office, or, of course, I do still think it's on the table to completely start with a clean slate. I just don't know what that looks like.
Sam Amick from The Athletic joining us, mentioning, the Kings don't want to move on from Luke Walton. The Cleveland Cavaliers yesterday moved on from Coach John Beilein, and over at The Athletic, you guys have a great piece on just kind of his tumultuous tenure there with Cleveland. Given everything you guys reported and just everything we've heard, how did he even last that long with the Cavs?
Yeah, I mean, that one was an out-of-body experience in terms of I wasn't involved in the reporting on that piece and enjoyed reading it just because of the depth and the information. And honestly, I talked to my editor about this yesterday. I also appreciated the balance in that story. As you know, there was perspective in there from John's side as well, and what the experience was like for him. And certainly in what we do, you got to try to be balanced. But once you have all that information and insight, I'm with you. It seems incredible that he lasted this long. And certainly the anecdote that gets your attention the most, and it was just pretty revealing, is that the players, and if the listeners don't know this quick side story, John Beilein during a video session had essentially gotten on his team for not playing hard enough, but he said they were playing like thugs. Obviously, that terminology is extremely incendiary and it's not going to land well, especially in a league that's predominantly African-American. He then went on to say that he meant to say slugs. And what we now know from the reporting is that the players lost all respect for him at that point because their perception, and I certainly don't blame them, was that he was not being accountable for his actions. If you had a slip up, if you said what you meant, they wish he would have owned it. And instead, he went to ESPN and did an interview where he tried to say that he meant to say slugs. And from there, it's like you're unofficially a dead man walking from a job security standpoint. But the anecdote of the story was that players were going out of their way to play music that had the word thugs in it to in a passive-aggressive way to show their discontent. And they would do it, going onto a plane. They would do it in the practice facility. And there was even detail about which specific songs. And, honestly, I say this all the time, guys. Like, I know I sound like an athletic commercial, but I was loving that reporting because it's like the detail. I don't think that detail would get reported anywhere else. Those guys did a great job with that piece.
Well, all you guys do, honestly, Sam, The Athletic is amazing. And we encourage everybody to check out all the great work, all the sports. I mean, it's really, you guys have everything. And to get that detail is awesome. And does that make any future coaching hire, I don't know, give him any pause or reservation to look into the college game, or is that just kind of an isolated incident? Because we haven't really seen a lot of successful college coaches come and make that impact in the NBA.
I think one of the possible takeaways that I've seen people make elsewhere that I think I agree with is that John's age combined with the college thing is potentially now that's the profile that is going to have the toughest time getting in to the NBA, because Brad Stevens is one thing when you're an up and coming young college coach coming out of Butler, but you're not, the college game is not so deeply embedded in you that you're going to be stuck in your ways. Because some of John's stuff, again, based on their reporting, was that driving so hard that back in summer league, you had, people within the front office now wondering if certain young players, had injuries based on the way John was making them compete early on. And the NBA is different. It's a marathon. It's an 82-game season, and everything's got to be different. It seems like John just took his college program and his college routines and for the most part tried to apply them to the NBA. So that long-tenured college coach, it almost makes me wonder about like a Tom Izzo. Like, would Izzo, you hear about Izzo going to the NBA all the time. And I think now if I was an NBA team, as great as he is, or even Calipari is different because of what he can bring from a talent standpoint, recruiting-wise, but in his relationships. But, I think those long-term college coaches are now going to be looked at a little more sideways within the NBA.
I always found it interesting that they gave John Beilein a 5-year deal. And now that this is all kind of unfolded and, they're moving JB Bickerstaff into that head coaching role, and the organization's, word on this is, hey, we always plan for there to be a succession plan from Beilein to Bickerstaff, but yet they gave Beilein a 5-year deal. Is that from your understanding, has that always actually been the plan, or is this more of kind of a spin given the disaster that the Beilein tenure was?
I mean, it's spin, but it is definitely convenient for them that as bad as these optics are, J.B. Bickerstaff is a good coach, I think. And he's a guy who you can feel comfortable running your NBA team. And so they are able to pass the baton and not be a laughingstock right away. And that's a big deal. Now, I think the more fascinating element there that says a lot about the Cavs organization and the dysfunction that they deal with is that this is now the second time where I just think that the way that they make decisions is revealed in the types of contracts that they give out. So when they hired David Blatt, and it was largely an owner-driven decision, and then Dave Griffin at the time, the GM of the Cavs front office, almost pushes back against that choice by making Ty Lue the highest-paid assistant coach in the NBA. You're almost preemptively, preparing for the top guy to fail because you have your backup plan in place. And that sort of thing happened here as well with Beilein and Bickerstaff. Now, I mean, you're right with your point about the 5-year deal. That would seem to kind of undermine that idea that they saw JB taking over at any point this soon. So I don't think it's that extreme, but it's good for them that they had JB there, and it's certainly good for them that John, I mean, he ends up walking away from $12 million, and you get out from underneath that contract.
Sam Amick from The Athletic joining us as he does each and every Thursday here at 8 o'clock on The Drive. The buyout market's still going on. We saw a pretty significant move the other day with the Clippers adding Reggie Jackson from the Pistons. Any more buyouts that we should be on the lookout for?
Not a ton that I'm aware of. The only one I mentioned it yesterday on a different radio show and kind of made the rounds a little bit was the Lakers. If Mo Harkless gets a buyout from the Knicks, the Lakers would certainly have interest in him, but it seems uncertain whether or not he's going to get a buyout or even wants one. I can't seem to get a beat on, that situation there. Beyond that, I'll be curious to see when the playoffs roll around. Like, it's always interesting to find out if all the headlines about these buyout guys in the moment, like right now, if they ultimately match like the actual relevance of those players when the playoffs roll around. Now, Marcus Morris is, a very good player that the Clippers pick up, and I think he's going to be part of the solution for them. But the Reggie Jackson story was one that everybody was talking about, and then you look at it, and he goes to the Clippers as well. But, he's potentially their fourth guard, and I just don't see how many minutes he's going to get. So sometimes the buzz around the buyout guys is greater than reality, but beyond that, it's, the Lakers didn't improve. They're kind of standing pat and obviously feel good about what they have, and we'll see if that ends up being good enough.
Yeah, that race in L.A. is going to be a lot of fun to watch in the final stretch of the season. Sam, thank you as always. Great work at The Athletic, and we look forward to talking to you next Thursday.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
All right, Sam Amick.